All right, hey, I just wanted to check in because I finished another book, End of Watch by Stephen King. This is the third and final book in the Bill Hodges trilogy, and it was okay. I'll jump right into the premise of the book. Brady Hartsfield is still dealing with the repercussions from the end of the first book, where he got hit over the head by Holly when he was trying to blow up an entire fucking concert hall. And rightfully so, he was hit over the head and left with some brain damage. The doctors don't really think he can recover. They're just kind of keeping him alive in the hospital. And Brady finds out that he has this telekinetic ability, one, to kind of move objects slightly with his mind, but also he can jump into people's minds who are under some sort of state of hypnosis. So he first finds this out with a nurse who was looking outside the window, staring at the cars going by or whatever, and she's having this like mini seizure kind of thing in her head that isn't anything that you would notice, but it was a state of hypnosis. And Brady jumps inside of her head, and he can feel her thoughts. He knows everything that's going on in her head, and he can take control if he wants to. So we kind of find out that's going on, and at the same time, we find out that there's a lady who committed suicide, and Bill Hodges is trying to figure out if it was suicide or what really was happening, because it was one of the people from the original incident, and they ended up killing themselves. And Bill Hodges, Holly, not Jerome. Jerome's not in this book too much. He is in it at the end, but he's not in this book a whole lot. It's mostly Bill Hodges and Holly. They go and investigate. They find a little device known as a Zap-It device, which they kind of take note of, and they don't really have a lot to go on yet. They don't really know of its significance until later. It turns out that these Zap-It devices have this demo screen on them with these pink fish that go by, and you gotta tap them, and a number will pop up. And this is putting people who use it under a state of hypnosis. And obviously, Brady has that ability, so you can kind of see where that's going. So this Zap-It device actually had found its way into Brady's hands originally because of the hospital librarian named Al. He provided Brady with this device and noticed that Brady wouldn't really do anything with it. He would just kind of look at the demo screen and stare at the demo screen. There's also the main doctor of Brady Hartsfield that has just been kind of keeping him alive. He's been getting weirder and weirder. The staff doesn't really understand what's going on with him lately. His name is Dr. Barnabo. Something like that, Barnabo, I'm going to say for now. I can't remember if that's exactly right. But Brady is able to jump into both the main doctor and the librarian's mind. And every time he jumps into their minds, anybody's minds, it kind of leaves like a little less of that person with them every time he leaves. They remember less. They aren't quite themselves anymore. It fucks you up. And so if he's repeatedly doing it, he's taking away a lot of their humanity and a lot of their personality and who they are, and kind of just leaving them as almost like an empty shell for him to be able to jump back in at any time. This is also happening with random girls that had went to the Round Here concert from that first book. There was a big thing where this company said, hey, I'm sorry that the Round Here concert got canceled because of that crazy thing that happened. We're going to try to provide some Zap-It devices. Well, these Zap-It devices are also hypnotizing these young girls. And one of those young girls is Barbara, which is Jerome's younger sister. She was at the Round Here concert. She ends up with this device. She's looking at the device, looking at the demo screen. And one of the selling points by the guy who's been handing these devices out is you got to look at the demo screen of this fish game, and you got to see if your numbers add up to this amount and you'll get a certain prize or whatever it was. You got to pay attention to the demo screen, pay attention to the pink fish. Well, this is hypnotizing these girls. So Barbara gets in this sort of hypnosis state. Brady is able to jump into her mind from his hospital bed. He's able to jump into Barbara's mind, who is not anywhere near him, and convinces her to kill herself. She doesn't actually kill herself. She attempts it, but a boy nearby saves her from walking in front of a car in the middle of the road, and she ends up with just a broken leg. And this is starting to happen everywhere. There's a lot of suicides starting to pop up. More and more people are starting to kill themselves, specifically people from the Round Here concert, and also a couple victims that had survived from the Mr. Mercedes incident at the beginning of that book. So they're starting to find this link, but they don't know how Brady's doing this or why anything's happening, why he's able to get into people's minds. They don't even fully really understand that was what was happening by the end of the book. They still don't know how he was doing it. There's another little subplot going on constantly with Bill Hodges having pancreatic cancer, and he's slowly dying throughout this book. He is getting worse. He's always in pain. He can't really eat very much. He can't really drink very much. Holly finds out, and she gets really worried about him. She says, "You got to figure this out in 2 days, and then we're going to get you to the hospital. We got to get you treatment." Holly is an amazing character. Holly is such a good character throughout all 3 of these books. So a big portion of this book is Holly and Bill Hodges following clues to try to lead them in the direction that eventually will lead to Brady Hartsfield. That being said, Brady Hartsfield does die in this book. And yet it's still happening. Things are still going on. And that's because he took over another person's body. And that other person is, at first, Al, the librarian, and then the doctor. And the doctor is this kind of character he's made, named I can't quite remember the name, but it's Mr. Z, or Dr. Z, is this kind of persona that he's created inside of the doctor. And the doctor's mind is completely gone at this point. He doesn't really exist. He can't take control. Brady has full control of this doctor's body. I'm not going to spoil too much of this book because it is the end of the series, but they confront each other eventually, and it's an all right confrontation. I'm not a big fan of the way this book ended. It didn't really hit home with me. It did do an all right job at wrapping up the trilogy, but maybe I wasn't a huge fan of the book, honestly. It was all right. My favorite of the 3 books was actually Finders Keepers. That being said, I don't think Finders Keepers should have had Bill Hodges in it at all. I think that should have been a standalone thing. His whole part felt so forced into that book, and this book really made Finders Keepers feel even more like not a part of the series to me. It felt like he had another story in mind and then kind of was like, well, I need Bill Hodges to be doing the detective work on this for the second book. And then this book kind of just goes back and almost feels like a continuation off of that first book to me. This feels more like the second book than the second book felt. That being said, I'm going to get into some spoilers here, so if you're not interested in that, the book was all right. That's where I'm going to kind of leave that. The Bill Hodges does die at the end of this book, and so does Brady Hartsfield inside of the doctor's body. Jerome rescues Holly and Bill when they're in trouble after they've tried to confront him, and they end up killing Brady, and then Bill dies of his pancreatic cancer, and the book kind of ends there. Like I said, wasn't a huge fan of how it wrapped up. Honestly, wasn't a huge fan of this story overall of this third book. It just didn't hit home very well. It kind of felt dragged on a little too long. It wasn't a long book, it's 400 pages, but not that it needed to, but it didn't feel like it was saying anything new. I kind of almost feel like the first book should have just been the first book, and Brady should have died at the end of that, and then Finders Keepers could have been its own thing, and then this didn't really need to exist. This almost felt like a justification to make it a trilogy. I could be completely in the wrong here. It's just how it felt to me. It felt very strange to me. That being said, I do think that the trilogy was worth reading, specifically for that second book. That second book is really... The more I've thought about it, the more I like that overall story of Finders Keepers. My ranking is the second book, then the first book, then this book. So I don't know if that says anything, but I think I'm going to kind of leave this review here. It was an alright series. It was worth reading, but it just didn't end the way that I would kind of hope it would end. It kind of just felt like a little dragged on, and I don't know. It was alright. It was okay. But anyways, I appreciate y'all for watching and sticking around this long, and thanks.